Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Waterloo Greenway here for our monthly virtual tour. We're looking forward to answering your questions and showing you a behind the scenes look at the progress at Waterloo Park. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, John Rigdon from our planning and design team will be walking us through a behind the scenes look of Waterloo Park. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. So I'm going to start by introducing the Waterloo Greenway project before we dive into Waterloo Park specifically. So Waterloo Greenway is a linear park on the eastern side of downtown Austin. You can see it here in green represented on top of the map. And it runs along about 1.5 miles of Waller Creek, which is represented in white. In total, this is about 35 acres of new and restored public open space. And this work's being done through a partnership between the Waterloo Greenway Conservancy, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, and the City of Austin, who's the public partner in this relationship. And together, we're tackling this scope over a series of phases. It's also important to note here that this is the result of years and years of community work to advocate for this restoration improvement, and then ultimately an international design competition, which selected our architecture team and the plan they brought forward to City Council to make these improvements. And that team is on the landscape architecture side is Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, and on the architecture side is Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners. And I'll talk more about them and the work they're doing as we go forward. And together with a team of other local experts, we're working on this 35 acres. As I mentioned, the 35 acres is a series of parks which will be executed in phases. So today we're going to talk about phase 1, which is Waterloo Park, highlighted kind of in the thick orange line on the right side of your screen here. And that's actually the north. We flipped the map here and changed the orientation a little bit. But the north is over here, and this is 15th Street. And Lady Bird Lake is down here to the south. And I-35 runs right here to the east, so just to orient y'all. This work's going to be tackled in phases, as I mentioned. And you can see this is a plan that envisions 3 phases with some sub-phases therein. But phase 1 is Waterloo Park. Waterloo Park on its own is about 10.5 acres. So, it's a sizable portion of the 35 acres and a large park on its own. For those of y'all who are familiar with Houston, this is about the same size as Discovery Green in Houston. So on its own, this is a large public space. So the vision, this is a shot at night, a rendering laid on top of a photograph, looking southwest from above the Brackenridge Hospital garage. You can see this lit up structure here, which is the canopy over the Moody Amphitheater, and a large audience enjoying a performance. You can also see the park spaces here around that. So, I'm going to talk more about that in detail as we move into the tour. This is about a year into construction at the end of last year. To get to this point, we had done a lot of civil work, putting utilities underground, reshaping the land, and we're just beginning to see a lot of the structures come above ground and some of the trees that we relocated. Jumping forward to just a few days ago, this is Waterloo Park today, more or less. The significant improvements to the buildings and park spaces that have happened in that time span. And we're moving quickly towards completing all this work, and I'll walk through kind of the latest and greatest on site. So let's go. We're going to follow along on a series of tour stops, as if I'm giving you a walk through the park physically in person, and we'll talk about some of the great features that are going in now and construction updates from the last few days. So we're going to start walking in from Red River Street right here, now crossing the 14th Street Bridge and entering into the Moody Amphitheater. So as you walk across the historic 14th Street Bridge, you'll enter into the park and see the steel canopy on your left with the stage below, and the structures of the Moody Amphitheater in front of you. If you turn to your right a little bit to the north, you'll see a connection up to a plaza level above, including an elevator, as well as a ticket booth, which will sell or give out tickets to the many events that we're going to have in the space. Here, moving a little bit into the park, you can see a lot of these openings in the building. And, one of the important things we gathered from, working with our partners in the Parks and Rec department, as well as many community engagements throughout the years the design has been developed, is, our community loves events in parks. However, a lot of our community doesn't love the impacts those have on the parks. The closures which may be required after a large event in order to haul everything out or allow the grass time to heal or repair any damage to the landscape. So one of our goals of designing this park was to have the infrastructure to support these events be permanent and be able to be closed without impacting the use of the park. So, this facility has more than 70 restrooms, which are built into the landscape behind these curved walls. They can be open for a large show, and our sort of estimated maximum capacity is around 5,000. During normal park use, they could be completely closed safely, or we could partially open them. Similarly with these windows you see here, these are concessions to serve food and beverages at events. So during the max capacity event, we'll have all these concession windows open. During general park use, we may have them all closed, and we have a really nice steel door that'll close these, and it'll just feel like a wall. It won't feel like a closed building. Or we could also leave some of these open to serve the park if that was what was needed. So the idea of this flexibility, but also of building in all of that support infrastructure permanently in a way that does not negatively impact the park and also prevents the damage and closure of that in and out of portable toilets or concession stands or stages and all those other things, which can really limit enjoyment of the park after these fantastic events. Moving a little bit further into the site, what we're calling the lower lawn area. During a normal day at the park, this will be an open lawn where you can, walk your dog or throw a frisbee or just sit down and enjoy the beautiful lush grass. During an event, this area might be seated with temporary chairs for certain types of events, or it could have kind of a picnic blanket set up for other types of events. It's a very flat lawn space. So here's what that looks like, right about now. We're finishing out the grading. We're building this steel canopy over the stage. You can see that being put together now. You can see the landscape hasn't gone in yet, so there'll be a grass here. One thing to note about the landscape in this area is in order to save as much on-site water and clean it as we can, and also make sure that this space doesn't get massively impacted every time we have an event, we have a very quick draining lawn system here that drains into a cistern. And that cistern is kind of underground beneath these pieces of equipment just in front of the stage. That water then goes through a series of pipes and is treated in rain gardens in the southern portion of the park before it's reintroduced as clean water back into Waller Creek. So really kind of trying to maximize the cleaning and usage of water, the savings of water where we can on site. I'll also note you can see these kind of unique curved walls of concrete throughout this area of the park. These serve as the retaining walls and that put the back of house structures and hold them underground. They also will have vines, ivy growing up them. So this allows us to put a lot of the back of house underground underneath green roofs or occupiable plazas at the Trinity Street level from behind. Moving forward towards the stage, you can see again this steel canopy overhead. This canopy, it's a beautiful architectural object, but it also provides shade and then has a skylight system, which you can kind of see up in here if you look closely, which provides rain protection for the performers on stage. I think this is a cool photo because you can kind of see the shade that provides over here and how the shade moves throughout the day and creates these really unique light conditions. Another kind of cool fact about this roof is it's created from layered steel I-beams. These are 6-inch I-beams that are painted white, and in total there's almost 5 miles of steel I-beams stacked up here on the roof, supported by these very narrow columns. And that I-beam, that system of I-beams supports all of the things that we'll need to rig from this to put on a show, so speakers and monitors and screens and lighting and all of those curtains, all those types of things. But it also provides that shade and rain coverage effect. You can see that here. One other note from this photo, which is pretty cool, as you can see, we have stairs that go up to the stage, as well as a ramp. I'll talk a little bit more about this in one of our next stops, but the intent here is this is a public space when there's not a performance going on, and this allows it to be accessible and occupiable. Here's another shot, and again, one of the cool features at this location is, this is intended when there's not a performance going on to be an area where the public can hang out. So, our great contractor, DPR Construction, who's been building this project for us, some of their folks are on site here enjoying their lunch at these picnic tables, socially distanced, underneath the great shade and rain protection of the canopy. So this kind of creates a cool preview of what this space can be used for when there's not a show. So if you imagine kind of a typical day, if there's a show, there'll be some setup, there'll be a sound check, and then that evening there'll be the show. By the time the park opens the next day, everything will be put away, and folks will be able to come up here on the stage and enjoy the shade, and we'll have some temporary seating and tables up here for them to enjoy lunch or just a break from the sun. So I think it's a pretty cool shot showing kind of what the future will hold for this space. Just a kind of glamour shot of the steel I-beams. You can see all those different layers of I-beams which stack together, all 5 miles of steel, in order to create that shade and kind of this cloud-like structure which hovers over the stage. Another cool shot here is showing kind of that stacking and how many layers of steel we have, which add up to create, not only the structural support, but also that density which provides the shade. A view from head on, this is a couple of weeks ago, so we've done a lot more work to clear this out and start to begin the landscaping. That gives you a sense of what you'll look at kind of from the mixed position right at the center of the lower lawn. And then our rendering of what that would look like during normal park use. So you can see those vines, and you can see folks enjoying the lawn and the stage when there's not a show going on. Jumping forward, we're going to kind of take a quick detour down to the southwest corner of the park and talk about a tree transplant which happened, a month or so ago. One of the things that we've tried to do in the park is create this balance between, beautiful existing larger trees and new trees, new plantings throughout the park. We've had the opportunity to relocate 8 heritage trees, live oaks primarily, within the site. And 4 of these came from adjacent projects who had trees that were, going to have to be removed in order to accommodate development on site. And so these developers or other governmental entities worked with us to relocate those trees into Waterloo Park, where they could have a new home and provide great shade for future park goers. So this example is right next to our offices. So we office right here in Symphony Square. We've had a lot of programs there as well. Some folks may have come to Creek Show, which has been located in that space for a couple of years now. And so this tree is right next to our office, and the team of developers from Graystar worked with us to relocate this tree and fund its relocation into the park. And so we've done this a number of times with different types of equipment depending on the tree, but in this case it was moved on a series of inflatable bags and pushed about the block over to its new home in the corner of the park. Just some quick facts on this tree, is because it's very exciting to have such, old established trees move to the park. This tree is over 100 years old, and it has a 26-inch diameter trunk and weighs around 150 tons. So, just imagine the feat that goes into moving that, and these guys did a great job relocating it with this equipment over the course of a Saturday in the street. And so here you can see it in its new home. And since this photo has been taken, a lot of landscaping has gone in to connect this with the surrounding area. And I'll show an overhead shot that shows this in more detail later in the presentation. But really, this will be kind of the anchor of the southwest corner of the park and a major trailhead down into the rest of the greenway. So there's these great opportunities to relocate these trees and really establish some shade, which we all know we need so much, particularly this time of year in a park. I'll also note that in addition to 8 relocations on site, we're planting around 500 new trees on site, and then thousands of shrubs and smaller plants. And so we'll see some of those going in. But it's about, having day one shade, but also establishing a long-term sustainable canopy for the future. So moving back kind of into our tour stops, we're going to take a peek backstage and talk about some of the facilities that we've built into the amphitheater. So here's a look, you know, kind of leaning over a plaza space and looking down at the stage. You can again see that ramp and stair, which allow people to use the stage during a non-show. And then you can see some views into the back of house spaces. Here's a couple of shots which show that in more detail. And so you can see through here all the way to the loading dock. Again, you know, working, you know, with our special events partners at the City of Austin and the community, as well as the music office and other community groups, we really identified some of the needs to have this be a successful space for events. And one of those was having a permanent loading dock where folks could load in and out equipment for all the different types of shows. So through here, you can see the loading dock area where you have 3 truck bays. So trucks will be able to come in here safely, load in and load out behind closed doors and bring that stuff out on stage. During a normal park use, there's steel doors here which will be closed so people can occupy the space safely without worry of wandering into backstage or anything like that. This is older, and I just like this photo because this is the back of house before all the floors and plumbing and walls went in. But within this space behind here, we have halls and rooms. And so we have 6 dressing rooms for artists, you know, 6 private dressing rooms to accommodate a range of different artists and performing groups. We have a green room, we have offices for the touring staff, we have IT rooms, we have electrical closets, you know, we have washers and dryers and showers and all the things that go into really supporting a robust event. All of that is tucked underneath the hillside with green roofs and plazas above. So right above where we're looking at this photo right now, there's a green roof space as well as a public plaza coming off Trinity Street. So, you know, this will feel like the hillside behind a wall rather than a massive building in the park, but also be able to support all of the square footage needed to put on these really world-class types of events we anticipate the park having. So moving out from, you know, the back of house spaces and into some of the higher elevation spaces in the southwest corner of the park, you'll kind of get a sense of that grade change and why we're able to put a lot of the building underground. So, you know, this is a view of, you know, a deck that we're building underneath 2 great heritage live oaks on site. So behind the, you know, the live oaks here, underneath this space, that's where we just were. The dressing rooms, the green room are right under here, underneath this entry plaza into the park, and there'll be green roofs built on top of the building over here, so you'll experience it as a hillside. In the foreground here, we have this great, large, oval-shaped deck underneath these 2 trees. These trees have been here since long before Waterloo was a park. You know, they provide wonderful shade in this area of the park, and we've gone to great lengths to preserve and save them on site and utilize that shade for seating and gathering. So one of the cool things you can kind of get a sense of here is in order to build this deck, we had to be very careful about where the footings and foundations for the deck were placed. So, you know, we did air spading and other digital measurement in order to identify the roots and then put the foundations in places that didn't conflict with those roots. So you can kind of see the way that works with some of the interesting layout of the trusses which support the deck. Zooming out a little bit, you can kind of get an even better sense of how the plaza and the building go underground and transition seamlessly onto this deck. So from your left to your right will be a major entrance into the park from Trinity Street. And then all these areas under these trees will have temporary seating, which will allow folks to enjoy food from our adjacent food trucks and family pavilion, as well as just shade and enjoyment of the park. This is the family pavilion. This is a great structure which was designed by local architects, Michael Shue, Office of Architecture. And, you know, this is also a moment where, you know, we really had a wonderful point of community engagement that kind of changed the thinking of the project. Originally, this location had kind of a park cafe, a smaller cafe with indoor and outdoor seating, something like you might see in a park or a museum in other cities around the country. And we were advancing the concept and the design of that. And then we had a series of meetings and community engagement about Waterloo Park. And one of the questions we asked was, you know, how do folks feel about this cafe? And, you know, food service in general in the park. And when we had those conversations, we got overwhelming feedback from the community that a cafe just didn't seem like the right fit for this new park in Austin, reflecting our community's values. And so, with that feedback, what we really heard was we want something that's lower price point, both for park visitors to purchase food, but also for potential vendors who would want to operate this space, so that we could open the ability to run a business in Waterloo Park to many more members of our community. So with that, we kind of went back to the drawing board with our team and came up with the idea of having this be a small food truck court with a really elegant concrete restroom and storage building rather than a cafe. And so what you see here is the result of that collaboration and design work by Michael Shu and his team, which allows us to have 3 restrooms, you see here, and then a large storage space to support programs, and then all the back of house stuff you don't want to see from food trucks, like trash in particular. So in the future, we'll have 2 food trucks kind of flanking this building, which is again built into the hillside. And then the deck, which we just entered on, is in the foreground here, and that'll have seating in the shade for folks to enjoy the food that they purchase from these food trucks. And we envision this as, these food trucks won't come in and out every day. They'll be longer term residents of the park, but temporary, and the ability for us to move through different vendors and styles of cuisine really opens up a lot of possibilities for the community. So, in my mind, this is a really great moment of collaboration that reshaped kind of what we were thinking in the design plan. Moving forward and up the hill, so the building is here. We moved up to Trandy Street, and we're going to take a look at the Deal Booth Promenade. So this is an elevated walkway right here, which navigates some of the really unique elevation changes in the park. From the area where we're kind of hovering over down to the far sort of southeast corner of the park, which is just behind these trees, there's about 50 feet in grade change. One of our values kind of system-wide for the entire Greenway is universal accessibility. So we really want to have all of the areas of our park and all of our pathways be accessible to folks of all ages and mobility types. And we try to do that wherever we can without really kind of abrupt switchback ramps or elevators or lifts, and try and navigate those grades with shared pathways that folks of all mobility can use. So that really opened up this opportunity for this great elevated walkway, or almost like a bridge over top of the landscape and in the tree canopy. Zooming in a little bit, you can get a sense of the sort of thin concrete profile and unique narrow columns which support it. And it'll have handrails and lights. Don't worry, that's coming in next. But we wanted it to be really thin and narrow so you could see the landscape through it and create all these unique viewpoints from it down into the landscape. Also, you'll notice here, and you'll see in future photos, that it has this great interaction with trails going beneath it and landscape going beneath it. So you can just imagine sort of being up here and kind of leaning on the rail and looking down, and you've got a beautiful garden with kids running through it beneath you, and you can sort of meander your way on the path and make your way down there to enjoy that experience as well. This will be one of those great kind of viewpoints out over the entire park. Here's another cool view that shows you kind of working your way underneath it. This will all be planted, and there's pathways which make their way under there. And you can see that narrow profile of the concrete that our team worked so hard to create and be able to support all the traffic which will be going on up there on the walkway. You can also see those thin grouped columns which allow for the landscape to work their way in and those pathways to pass underneath. Here's a cool shot, to me, that just shows kind of the detail and challenge that goes into creating this really thin profile, curved, meandering, elevated walkway. Our team at DPR, working with their subcontractors, created this post-tension concrete structure supported that rebar cage through the system you see around it with the scaffolding and the wood supports. And so it was a real fun challenge to get this together in order to create the vision that you see here. Moving forward, we're going to stop in the Kitty King Powell lawn, which is the biggest play element in the park. Here's a view of a rendering of what that'll ultimately look like. You can see the Deal Booth Promenade in the background here with the railings on, that'll soon be on there, and how it crosses and sort of weaves its way around the landscape. You can also see some of the more formal play elements in the foreground. You know, one of the things that we worked on really closely with Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, our landscape designer, as well as our partners in the Parks and Rec department here in Austin, is both of those groups are really focused on nature-based play, kind of as the way forward for playscapes in our parks. You know, nature-based play has a lot of research and science around it that supports. You know, it's a deeper, more engaging form of play for children, which can create a much better learning experience. It also creates a longer periods of play without boredom. And we took that cue and worked with them and created the design you see here, which has these kind of almost signposts of more formal play structures built with natural materials. So you see, you know, the climber here made of wooden logs. We have what we call our mega grass here, which is kind of a toddler play feature, which looks like gigantic reeds or grass. And then we have a stone slide over here, and I'll show you some more photos of that. But the idea is, you know, kids come, they see these things which are really familiar play elements, and that gets them comfortable that this is a place to play. And then we have much less familiar and more exploratory play elements, like stone scrambles, which go up hills, and pathways which weave through some of the gardens and landscape areas, which, you know, you can play tag or chase or just sort of hang out and enjoy some of those elements. And really, it lets kids know you can play here, that's okay. And so the combination of these elements really create a nature play area for kids of all ages. Also important to note is the proximity to the restrooms, hand washing station, and food service. And that really allows for a much longer time that families can spend in the park without people getting hungry or bored. So, you know, our team took a lot of time to make sure the play is really well coordinated with the surrounding features. And here you can see what that play area looks like now. So our climbers haven't gone in yet. You know, there'll be a large climber right here where this orange piece of equipment is. Our mega grass will be right here in the foreground. Then there'll be a slide over here, and I'll show you another photo of that. You can see around here we've put these limestone blocks. Those will be seating areas for, you know, parents to keep an eye on their kids, or kids to take a break from playing and just enjoy some shade. Here's a shot from the team that's building our custom stone slide. You know, one of the other experiences that I think lots of Texans shared with us during the design process was metal slides are just too hot. You can't have a metal slide down here. Everyone will burn themselves. No one will want to enjoy it most months of the year. And then plastic slides just don't really fit well with that nature-based play approach. So we worked with a fabricator actually in Germany and built this custom stone slide, which fits around a tree and into the landscape. So this will sort of hug its way around one of the great heritage trees on site and provide a nice, cool sliding surface for you know, people to play on. This is in Austin now and will be installed on site soon. But it was really cool as we got update photos from the team building this. They were really excited about putting this together for us. So in the future, again, climber will be right here where this orange piece of equipment is, and the slide will work its way down around this tree and into the play space here. And then you can see over here we have our restroom, hand washing station, and food just off screen. So a great connection there, again, to lengthen folks' stay and really allow people to enjoy this park throughout the entire day. You know, moving a little further to the south and connecting to that play area, we have what we call the Hill Country Garden. We call it this because, when this was turned into a park, this area still maintained a lot of its great historic live oaks. We have a lot of heritage live oaks in this corner providing great shade. It's also the highest point of the site, and it's kind of almost this rocky hill in the southwest corner. And, it gave us this great opportunity to create the Deal Booth Promenade and really the pathways that go underneath, and I'll show some more images of that, but also to create this beautiful shade garden around those trees. This has given us an opportunity to collaborate with our friends at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, both now and long term on maintenance of the space, and bring some of that hill country life into downtown Austin in this garden space. So here's a view kind of looking out over it. I like this shot because you can see the city in the background and the Deal Booth Promenade there on the left, but you can also see all those great existing heritage trees filling that space up. And then you can see some of the new ones, like this tree closest to us that we're putting in to further enhance that shade canopy. And again, this is just one of almost 500 trees that we're planting on site, which will provide that long-term sustainable canopy. here are some more of those trees, even smaller ones going in. And I like this shot too, because you can see the soils. We're replacing, more than a foot of soil on site, so these trees can survive and thrive. You can also see our purple pipe here, working with the City of Austin's reclaimed water system to provide a redundant, non-potable water system to water all of these plants. You can also see the stone scramble feature that I mentioned earlier. This right here is all these little stones that I think you can probably see. These are a waste product from a quarry. So, many of y'all may be familiar with houses that have that sort of stone facade or cladding on them. This is the waste product from that process that's not really used for anything else. So our team identified this waste product and gave it a new life as creating these informal pathways which meander throughout the garden, connect over to the play areas over here. So you can see how they kind of dart underneath this elevated walkway, the promenade, and have interactions with all the garden spaces around and really create areas to explore. Sort of moving up the hill, I like this shot because you can see down across that great 50-foot grade change from highest point of the site to the lowest point. And you can see all the pathways which meander in between these great existing trees. You can also see in the shot the lighting that we're starting to put in. So, we're going to follow park hours, that the rest of our park system does. But we're also going to provide safe lighting for when it's dark for folks to be able to move safely and comfortably through our trails. So you can see those lights going in throughout the park, which will provide that level of safe lighting on our trails. As I mentioned, we sort of meandered these pathways through the trees, and we wanted to create, not only no impacts on the existing trees, but also seating areas, kind of nooks in the shaded corners that people can enjoy and look out over the garden spaces, which will kind of fill in these elbows. Also worth noting here is in this location, we're using a pervious pavement material. So this has kind of a gravel, a decomposed granite-like aggregate, which is bound together with a glue-like substance, which is a safe material, environmentally friendly material, but allows rain to filter through it, creating less impervious surface downtown, and really helps sustain a lot of the plantings and garden spaces we have around here. So that's used in these locations. And then you can see a close-up shot of those custom benches. They're cast-in-place concrete benches, which will have a wood topper for a little bit more comfort when you sit on it, but allow us to kind of nestle some seating back in underneath the shade and great views out into the garden. And here's another look at kind of one of those elbows of bench seating, the existing heritage trees. And we're just, this is a few weeks old, so the soils haven't gone in yet and the plantings haven't gone in yet. But long term, our rendering showing what it will look like is something like this. So you can kind of get an idea of people sitting and enjoying the shade, and a lot of these really beautiful hill country shade tolerant plantings, native species, real focus on that, going in these shaded areas and kind of seeing, kids running around and exploring some of those pathways. So that's the Hill Country Garden, and it'll continue as we do more of these tours to fill in with more plantings and become more of a garden. And so please come back for updates on that, because there'll be more and more plantings every day. So now I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit, and we'll take a kind of helicopter drone tour around the park and see some aerial views of the different spaces we were just talking about. So we're going to start basically over the garage for the hospital. And looking southwest towards the Capitol and towards downtown. And you can see the canopy over the Moody Amphitheater here. You can see that beautiful Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners designed building and how it kind of wedges into the hillside. So this is green roof going in above, and then this is an occupiable plaza that you can walk in on from Trinity Street and come down here the stair or the elevator that we showed earlier. You can also see all those concessions and restrooms, which are built into this building. And then the large lawn where folks will be able to enjoy a show or just enjoy the park during a normal day of park use. Moving forward, kind of another view, really straight on towards the Capitol. You can see how closely located it is to the Capitol. You can also see, again, this large lawn where people will sit and enjoy a show and all the supporting infrastructure. Also down here in the foreground, which I didn't mention earlier, is we share the park with the flood control tunnel for Waller Creek. So we have this pond and flood control system, which takes, most of the land we're turning into park space out of the floodplain. This is a working facility, which, is constantly maintaining and controlling the flow of Waller Creek, and the park is really built around that. And so you can see this elevated lawn structure, which stretched out over the pond to reclaim about a ½ acre of parkland, which is the, back of our Great Lawn. Moving to the southeast corner, earlier I showed you guys the relocation of the tree, and this is its final home right here. So you can see that tree with protection measures around it so that we don't trample its new home. And in the future, the trail will come up here from below the 12th Street Bridge and wind its way up here to Red River. This will be a great shaded area where, you can imagine going for a jog or a walk and coming up here and sitting around benches in this great shade tree. It will also really be a great entry into the park, from 12th and Red River. Moving around to 12th Street and kind of hovering over the southernmost area of the park, you can see that flood control facility here, which helps support keeping all these parks out of the floodplain. And then you can see the Deal Booth Promenade and all of those pathways which make their way through the shade trees in this corner of the park. I also like this shot because you can see the soils going in. So the darker colored areas are the new soils, which are going in to support all of those great, thousands of plants and 500 plus trees, which we're planting on site. And the soils are kind of working their way north. Rotating to the Trinity Street side of the park and looking east, you can see the, Michael Schuh Office of Architecture designed family pavilion. That great deck going in, and you can see we're missing all the wood here, so this photo is a little bit older, but you can see that going in around the trees. And again, that pathway working its way around the play area right here. Here's a view looking down at the canopy of the Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners designed Moody Amphitheater. And you can see, if you can see just faintly, you can see that skylight system in the center here, which provides that rain protection over top of the stage. You can also get a sense of the extent of this structure. It stretches out over the street and stretches out over the plaza areas. So it provides shade not just for the stage, but also for the sidewalk on Trinity Street and these large plazas we have up on the roof. And then finally, a view from 15th Street looking all the way down the park to the south. So you can see downtown and Waller Creek stretching through the eastern side of downtown, and then the Moody Amphitheater and the park spaces. Also in the foreground here, you can see the ongoing restoration that we're working on of Waller Creek, primarily in partnership with the Watershed Protection Department. So, this restoration work is ongoing at the same time as the park, and we'll really have this, beautiful moment where you cross the 14th Street Bridge and you can look to the north and see a beautifully restored Waller Creek, and then you can look in front of you into the south and see the amphitheater and the park. So it'll create a great entry moment and really help with the long-term success of, the park and the creek in general to make this improvement. And so with that, that's the end of our tour, and Melissa and I will look at questions that came through and answer those for you as best we can. So thanks for following along with me.
Thank you, John. That is a really exciting view, and we love showing off the park. Obviously, we would love to show folks in person and walk you through the site, but we want to be responsive to everything that's going on in our community right now and continue to show folks what's going on from the safety of your home. So just as a reminder, if you want to share, the next opportunity is coming up at the end of August. We have had a lot of engagement in the chat and through our Q&A, so I want to start going through some of our questions. So John, we've had several about the lower lawn area. We've had questions about possible event partners and if they'll have utility access. And if you could tell us a little bit about the drainage and how the lawn will respond to any weather events.
Absolutely. So I'll just jump back in my slides here. Maybe we'll go with an aerial. So regarding utilities, yes. So we've worked with our primary, our contemporary music partner, C3, to make sure that this is fitted out with, all of the electrical and other supporting infrastructure to put on a large-scale 5,000-person show with all the power needs and equipment possible. So, you know, we've got power running to a mixed position kind of front of house over here. We've got power and rigging support up in the canopy so that we can, you know, raise up the lights and spotlights and screens and speakers and curtains and everything else you would need to put on a show. So that is all in place, and you know, we even have to accommodate a large transformer room in the building in order to support that. So really we wanted to make sure that we have the most robust system we can so that we're not bringing in tons of temporary equipment for some of the larger events we might have. That said, we can also just sort of close all that off and have much smaller events that don't require that, and you won't see all that stuff. Regarding the drainage, the lower lawn, which is basically the area here, kind of inside of these concrete retaining walls, that one has a special stabilized soil system that has a support structure in it, which not only kind of keeps it from having ruts and holes, but also allows us to put in a very quick draining soil. That soil drains into a cistern, which is down here. So this large cistern right here, buried underneath the kind of lower area in front of the stage. That cistern then drains the water this way into a series of rain gardens right over here off screen, treating that water before releasing it back into Waller Creek. So, you know, that water itself, I'll also add, is coming from Waller Creek. So we're pumping Waller Creek water and lake water from the tunnel to, you know, water our lawn and garden spaces with a redundancy, as I mentioned earlier, from the purple pipe reclaimed water up here. Then that water is treated and put back into Waller Creek. So really trying to focus on water conservation as well as the survivability of the lawn through that quick draining and structured system.
Yeah, thank you so
and
much.
Did I cover that, Melissa? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really helpful because there is so much supporting infrastructure that we don't see at the surface level. We also have a question still related to the lawn about the size. So could you tell us a little bit about the event capacity?
Sure. So, you know, right now we're working through our capacity as we kind of, you know, finish building out the space. We're anticipating around 5,000 as a max capacity. So we'll have temporary seating, which we keep on site and will be available to use for events in different configurations. That temporary seating will go down here in this lawn space. There's a couple of concrete down aisles which will support that, which are going in. They're not in yet. And it's around 2,500 seats, and then an additional 2,500 capacity in these two seated, or kind of picnic seated lawn areas or standing lawn areas here. We also would have the option to do the whole thing standing, or for other events, it may be a smaller area just seated or all standing room down here. So there's that flexibility for different styles of events, but the anticipated max capacity for this space kind of outlined here is around 5,000.
Perfect. And then obviously outside of any events or shows, the park will be a park that you can visit and, you know, lay in the grass, you know, see the birds, see the creek. So we have a question about park time and the amphitheater. And so someone asked about grass and the surface level of the lawn. And then we have another question about the stairs and that ramp access that you talked about. So could you tell us park mode, what you just talked about, those spaces, what will they look like on a day-to-day normal time basis?
Sure, and thanks, Melissa, for pointing this out. Not only will, you know, if we have a show on a Saturday, Sunday morning we can open the park again, all this space here. But also, none of these events will be a full park closure. The only thing that'll close is this space you see here. So this area of the park, the Hill Country Garden, the playscapes, you know, the creek restoration, those areas will be open and still a park even during the show. And then, you know, the show will happen, and then the next day, all areas of the park will be open. So, you know, just wanted to point that out as well. You know, the stair, okay, talking about the stair and the access to the stage, I'll jump back to a photo of that.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, that's one of the most recent additions to the site. Every day it's changing. Every day we have new features going in. And this is one of the things that happened just within the past week.
Yeah, so you can get a shot of it here. So the idea is, you know, a stage usually has to be at least 5 feet up above the elevation of the kind of lower bowl standing seating area down here. And if it's 5 feet high, it has to have a handrail. Then you might have to have an elevator or a lift if you want to get people up there in order for it to be ADA accessible. And so again, kind of working with that goal of universal accessibility, Thomas Pfeiffer and partners, our design team, came up with this idea of having a stair area that you can sit on that has a ramp which moves diagonally across that stair. And so this provides full accessibility for walkers, wheelchairs, strollers, and also a stair that you can sit on. During a show, what we have is we have inserts, wooden inserts, which cover this and fill in this area and extend the stage all the way out to the edge. Those inserts are then taken off and stored, and then the next day the park's back open with this ramped access up to the stage. And again, I just think it's you know, really cool that the construction team was using the stage the way that we would see kind of a daily park use with some maybe smaller tables or chairs up here and taking advantage of that shade. So this is what that ramped entry point allows us to use the stage for it and keep it accessible without having to add in expensive and impactful elevators and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And those detailed views are really helpful to see the site because there are so many different little areas. We also have a question about Project Connect and if we are coordinating with Capital Metro on the Gold Line. And that's an excellent question because Project Connect has been so much in the news recently. And we have been in close coordination with their team. And we think it's really important for everyone in our area to have good access to Waterloo Greenway. So we have been communicating with them, and we would absolutely love to have a station or a stop next to the park so we can have folks from all parts of Austin accessing Waterloo Park for, you know, visiting with the kiddos or grandparents or coming to a show. So that's really important to us.
And also, what a great landmark the canopy will be for a stop or a place to meet and hop on future transit. So it'll be a great shaded place to wait for your ride.
Yeah, and we've seen those connections so important in other cities that have this type of infrastructure too. So that's a great partnership. We have another question about park features and the limestone path, and someone asked if we could take another look at that again just to see some of the detailing that you were talking about earlier, John.
Sure, let me jump ahead here. There's a couple views of it that I think will give a good idea. Moving a little slow.
And you can see all the different types of trails or paths that we have to give folks the opportunity for different experiences through the park.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start here and then I'll go to a more detailed view. But you know, this right here, you can see connecting with the Deal Booth Promenade is kind of our primary circulation path. This will be multimodal, so you know, bikes could use it, although it probably won't be a transportation corridor, if you will, you know, slow-moving bikes. And it's about 12 to 14 feet wide. And this works its way through the whole park. Off of that, we kind of have secondary paths, like the you know, pervious pavement material I showed you. Those are narrower, intended for a slower speed, aren't quite as direct, and really kind of engage with some of the more interactive features of the park, like the gardens and the playscapes and some of the gathering spaces. Then we kind of have this third level of path, and those are those stone scrambles. And you can see some here, if you can see my cursor, kind of working their way in the landscape. These paths are not intended to be circulation. They're not for getting around if you're in a hurry to get somewhere. They're really for unique ways to engage with the landscape. So, you know, if you want to go get a closer look at, you know, some butterflies enjoying the gardens, this is a way you could kind of get back in there without trampling anything and enjoy it. If kids kind of want to run and play tag, they can move their way around these pathways safely through the gardens without impacting the plantings and without having to like run into people who are moving to get from one place to another on the main pathways. So, you know, if we jump forward and look at it a little bit more closely, you can see here all of these little kind of, again, waste product stone of limestone that are fitted together to create this, scramble kind of informal pathway. And this sort of language of the scramble path weaves its way throughout a number of spaces in here, and you'll see it in other park spaces along the Greenway as well, due to kind of its ability to get really close to the garden areas, landscape areas, and be very immersive in the experience it creates. And then these pathways always ultimately connect back up with a secondary or primary pathway to get your way out of the scramble areas without trampling on any of the sensitive garden areas.
Yeah, that's great. That's one of my favorite features. I love that because you really will be able to get underneath those trees and really kind of find that pocket of nature in the middle of downtown. Now that we've seen all these features, people are getting excited. We can't wait to show it off. So we have several questions about park opening and when people can actually come to experience it. So we are anticipating spring of 2021. We're trying to get things done as quickly as we can, but of course we have to be responsive to COVID and safety on site. So we're working away so we can open it as quickly as we can. So thank you for that question. And then related to that, as folks are thinking about how they would get to the park, we have a question about parking. So I think it might be good to go back to one of the views that kind of shows a whole park area so we can talk about some nearby sites.
Yeah, and I think, I like this one because it really prominently shows some of the nearby parking areas. We are working with the state and, we'll be continuing to work with them, on partnership to park in the adjacent state garages. Excuse me.
Yeah, and one of the things about our location is that there is so much parking in the area with the hospital, the state, some other adjacent sites. There's actually a lot of inventory in the area that we can work together on to make sure that folks can use that to go to the park.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have along Red River Street and then Trandy Street and 12th, we have our accessible parking right next to the park. So a combination of parking adjacent to the park on street, including accessible, and then adjacent garage parking through partnerships. And, we really didn't want to turn any of this great park into parking. So we're looking at a partnership model to really get folks here, both for special events and general park use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we talked about a little bit earlier, parking, of course, is a consideration for accessing the park, but we also have to look into other opportunities like working with Capital Metro on transit, supporting bike infrastructure and getting folks to the park on their bikes. And then, whenever the vision for Waterloo Greenway is complete with all of our phases, you'll actually have a new hike and bike trail that connects to the existing hike and bike trail. That'll be 1.5 miles of a new extension of that to get you to Waterloo Park. So that'll be another mobility option for folks to be able to walk and bike their way to Waterloo Park.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comment just reminds me of one of my other kind of favorite facts about Waterloo Park is you can kind of see it here, but within Waterloo, within the 10.5 acres, there's 1 mile of new trails and pathways just within this park. So if you want to get a nice exercise walk in, you can work your way through some beautiful landscapes within the park without even leaving the park and get some great exercise. So both internal mobility and connections to other mobility corridors.
Yeah, for the runners or joggers out there, you're going to have a new running path that you can use once the park is open. And then we have one question about people experiencing homelessness and what the park operations plan is around that.
Yeah, so we're working with partner organizations whose focus is addressing homelessness in our community, and who are the experts on this and following their lead about what role we can play in helping address that community issue. And regarding kind of the rules and usage of the park, we're looking to the Parks Department and following their directive regarding parks rules, and we'll be enforcing that on site. I also think it's important to note that activation of a park space, really bringing it to life with services and programs, is good for the entire community. It makes everyone feel safe and welcome. So, you know, that'll be engagement, you know, with folks experiencing homelessness who are, you know, enjoying coming through our park and utilizing some of the park features, as well as, you know, the rest of our community who's also using the park. So that level of everyday engagement through our, you know, trained ambassadors and staff, you know, is a part of what we can contribute to helping with this overall community challenge of folks experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, in addition to having our rules and making sure that, you know, anyone in the park feels comfortable, we also are looking for ways to support people experiencing homelessness through our own programming. And we've actually had a really great partnership with a group called Art from the Streets that actually opens up their studio hours at Symphony Square to be able to help artists experiencing homelessness to build up their own, you know, financial well-being and build up their skills. So partnership, you know, as John mentioned, partnerships are a great way of doing that too. And we have a question about adjacent sites. So someone asked about what's going on across the street at the site that's under construction across Red River.
Oh yeah, I'll swing around and get a good look at that. So I think the question's referring to this site. So, you know, this is really the first project to come out of the ground with the Innovation District. And it's really exciting to us to see this happening. Central Health is redeveloping what used to be the kind of hospital complex here. And this is the first kind of office project to come out of the ground. So, you know, this will bring more jobs to our community, but also right across the park, as well as some other retail and amenities, which, you know, could be really beneficial to the park. One other cool thing to note that, you know, is in the future for this whole area, and, you know, we can use everyone's support with to ensure that it becomes a reality, is Red River Street, which you can see here, is going to be straightened. So it's going to go on the other side of this new office building that's coming out of the ground. This area right here will be turned into a promenade or a public, wide public street that will be closed off to cars. So there's a real opportunity here to turn this into a great public space that connects the redevelopment of this Central Health site to the park, and then provide some additional space. Like, you know, we imagine maybe it's used for vendors to sell, you know, local products and goods, or festivals can set up tents here. Or it can be an area where people can hang out and enjoy cafe seating from adjacent retail. So there's a great opportunity there, and that's a future phase of the work, and we'll need everyone's support to make sure that happens. But this is kind of phase one of seeing this entire area over here change and do like an extension of downtown mixed use. It will include residential and retail in addition to this early office going in. So really exciting for us to see the Innovation District really coming out of the ground now.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful to see that view. So we have time just for one more question, and it's actually a great segue to our very last slide about how you can support our project. So we have a question about corporate engagement on the project and how companies can help support Waterloo Greenway. So John, if you don't mind skipping over to our final slide, you know, this is one way that we're engaging the community. We want to keep folks up to date with the project through these virtual tours, but we absolutely need our community to help support this project and make sure that we can continue construction as quickly as we can. So if you are interested in supporting us, please visit waterloogreenway.org/support, and you can find different ways to participate with us if you feel like that's something that you'd like to do. We have many corporations that are also helping us with this series, so we'd like to give them a special recognition. So I want to thank our 2020 program sponsors, including BBVA, the PAL Foundation, Susan Vaughn Foundation, Waterloo Sparkling Water, and the Word Company. And if you want to share this with folks, we will have the recording available on our website later today, and it'll be available on our social media. And please let folks know that we have another tour coming up at the end of August. So thank you all for joining us. It was really great to go through your questions, talk with folks, and keep sharing the progress of Waterloo Park. And thank you, John, for that great presentation.